Right, I think we'll make a start then, if that's okay. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name's Karen McFarlane, and I'm the Policy Officer for Poverty and Vulnerable Children at Children in Wales. And I'm going to be chairing today's webinar session. Before we begin, there are just a few items of housekeeping that I need to go through. So the webinar will be recorded and will be available to view on our website. Your camera and microphone will remain off during the webinar. However, we do still want you to ask questions. So I'd encourage you to post any questions that you have into the chat as we go along. And then I'll try and collate these and put them to Mike, our speaker, during our Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. Because of this, because we're going to use the chat for questions only, can I just ask that we do only put questions into the chat rather than links to other things and everything else? I would also like to confirm that we'll send everyone an email with a link to today's slides, along with a link to the recording. And we aim to get these to everybody who's attending towards the middle of next week. And once you receive these, please feel free to share these with colleagues in your networks. And finally, towards the end of the presentation, we will post an evaluation form. There are just 5 questions on it, and can I ask that you all do take the time to complete this? It's really important to us. I know we all complete evaluation forms, but the information we receive back just helps us to continue to put these webinars on free of charge. Thank you. So welcome to our 4th session in our Children's Rights thematic webinar series. Each of our 6 sessions in this series focuses on a different area that either provide opportunities for or are barriers to realising children's rights. The United Nations Conventions on the Right of the Child, or the UNCRC, as we more commonly refer to it, includes the protection of all children from all forms of discrimination and harm. This includes the right of all children with mental health issues to be protected and have access to healthcare services, support and mental health information. We have made great strides in Wales in terms of adopting and implementing the UNCRC, but I'm sure we all know there are a number of areas that we would like to improve on. Now, we know the incidence of mental health amongst young people is increasing, and our speaker today will give an overview of the various difficulties young people experience with mental health and look at how we can support young people, build resilience and improve well-being. So today I'm delighted to welcome Mike. This is Mike Mainwaring, our Senior Training Officer at Children in Wales. Mike has worked with children and young people for over 28 years now, and in different settings such as prisons, mental health units, homelessness hostels. And he's also currently studying arts psychotherapy. And all through this time, children's rights has been the bedrock of all of his work. So welcome, Mike, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Karen. So, bore da, croeso. We're going to do a little bit of mindfulness before we start. So what I want you to do is where you're sitting, if you kind of shuffle forward so that your legs are at a right angle. So your back of you is slightly on the chair, don't go falling off. Put your hands on your legs where they are comfortable and close your eyes. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine there's a golden thread that's pulling you up towards the ceiling. So your back's slightly straightening. Don't let it go too far because it'll hurt. Our backs are naturally curved, they're not straight. And then I just want you to roll your shoulders back a couple of times. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to do some breathing exercises. So make sure your feet are firmly flat on the floor. So it feels like they're like the roots of a tree and you're feeling grounded. And what I want you to do is we're going to breathe in, we're going to hold in our tummy, and then we're going to breathe out. And we're going to do it 3 times. So breathe in, hold it in your tummy, and then slowly breathe out. And then breathe in, hold it in your tummy, and then breathe out. And this time when we breathe in, on the breath out, we're going to let out with a big sigh. So, and then what we're going to do, we're going to open our eyes. So that was a very gentle mindfulness. It lasts for less than a couple of minutes, and it's something you can do every day. You can be mindful while having a cup of tea, or whatever you drink first thing in the morning. Just sitting there, be mindful of the liquid, the smell, the taste, the look. What it tastes like in your mouth, what's it feel like in your mouth, and then swallowing, and just doing those breathings as you're doing it. So this is the stuff that we're going to look at. Obviously, this is 40 minutes of a course that I spend a whole day training on. And, there's lots of stuff that, I can't cover today. I particularly wanted to hone in on mindfulness and some of the techniques you can take away and use with children and young people. You can use these with yourself, with your colleagues, with family, as well as the children and young people you work with as well. And, I do a whole host of mental health courses, such as mental health first aid, eating disorders, self-harm and suicide, substance misuse, dealing with teenage brains and behaviors. So there's a whole wealth of courses there, but this is very specific. So I'm going to cover some areas in terms of anxiety and depression, and yeah, we'll look at some of the issues that have come up for children and young people. Karen pointed out the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I've just pulled out 4 articles that I think relate to mental health, particularly now. One is about you and the voice of the child. Often because children aren't listened to, that can lead to frustration, a sense of isolation. Article 24 is generally about their health and the services they receive. And I think pertinent to now and over the next 6 months with the cost of living, this idea that every child should have an adequate standard of living, which is difficult when we've got the highest numbers of child poverty in the whole of the UK. And also in terms of right to education. And what I mean by that is that young people have had their education disrupted because of COVID. Some young people aren't going back to school. Some young people, for various different reasons. But if they're struggling with mental health, they're going to struggle with education. If they're going to struggle with education, they're going to struggle with their futures. So I want you to just spend a moment and just think, what makes you happy? And when you've got that, what makes you happy in your head, I then want you to think, how often do you do that? So if what makes you happy is going for a walk in the woods, how often do you do that? So when we're looking at mental health, this is what we're looking at in terms of a definition. So it's a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So just bear that in mind as we're going through the slides. So this survey was conducted in the first between the 11th and 16th weeks that we were into lockdown, which I know seems like an absolute time away. And it was conducted with 13,000 people across Wales. And what they found was around 20% of people were suffering severe effects. So they found out that it was affecting all of us in terms of our mental health, feeling more anxious or feeling down or not worried about the future and so on. But that it had a real effect on about 20% of people. And these are the people that are most affected. So young adults, women, and those living in deprived areas. And the issues that people were struggling with were existential fears, really. Fears around illness, around dying, other people dying, losing loved ones, losing your job, and also the effects that people were experiencing from the lockdown, the social and physical isolation from each other. I think one of the things we learned during lockdown was that we actually like each other. We like being with each other. These statistics are from a number of different reports, and when you get the presentation, they're all in the notes. I'm not going to go into them now. But in the last 3 years, so that was up until 2020, October 2020. Young people there was a 50% increase in their likelihood of having mental health problems. And that translates into, now 5 children in every classroom of 30 have a mental health problem. 1 in 6 children between 5 and 16 like to have a mental health problem. And 52% of 17 to 23-year-olds say they've experienced a deterioration in their mental health over the last 5 years. And this is the thing to bear in mind, is that, it's very easy to say, oh, it was awful because of lockdown and the pandemic. Children and young people are experiencing mental health issues before pandemic. It was a real issue before pandemic, and services weren't coping with that at the time. These ones, the last statistics were specifically about Wales. These are generally about the first ones are about children in England. It's conducted by the Children's Society. They are doing work in Wales now. So the last slide was very much Wales. These are about England. So there's something to be compared with there. And so between 6 to 16-year-olds, since 2017, there's been nearly a 40% deterioration in mental health. And 50% of mental health problems started before the age of 14. So emotional distress, we all have emotions, we all feel emotions, and we all get upset, we all can feel sad, or angry, or overjoyed. We all feel ecstasy. That's part of the human condition. And so the question is, what kind of events can cause this emotional distress for children and young people? So it could be anything from abuse and neglect, so that early childhood trauma, through to transitions between moving home, moving schools, moving from one foster home to another, bullying, being a young carer, through to money, and also stigma. So the stigma of having issues with your mental health. So I want to talk to you about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. So the parasympathetic, both of these are part of the autonomic system. So they're the system of the body that controls itself. And one part of that is fight or flight. So what happens is in here, which is the ganglia, which is the primitive brain. If you hold your hand up with your fingers, mine's not very good for you at the minute. If you hold your hands up with your fingers outstretched and put it behind the base of your spine, base of your skull, and downwards, that is where your nervous system, that's where your brain starts. And that part is called the ganglia. That's our primitive brains, our lizard brain. So that is responsible for fight, flight, freeze, flop, befriend, and flock. So fight and flight, if we feel a threat, our adrenal glands will release adrenaline into our blood. That tells the heart to pump faster, which means our lungs take in more air, oxygen goes to our limbs, and we're either going to go run towards something to fight it, or we're going to run away. We also can freeze, and that freezing means that we're taking in more information about what's going on, so we know how to react. Flop, or pretending to be dead, that can be another technique in terms of dealing with threats. Befriend, so you might actually try and go towards that danger to try and befriend that threat. And flock. Flock is what children do when you enter a room and you don't know them, and they usually hide behind their caregiver's legs. All of you probably have experienced that. That's called flocking. So they're flocking to feel safe. One of the things to bear in mind with flocking for you, if you're trying to build rapport with a young person and you find it very hard to engage them, see who they flock to, and then befriend the person they flock to. Because if that child or that young person can see, mum likes this person, mum trusts this person, maybe I can trust them as well. So it's using that flocking tendency. The parasympathetic nervous system also has rest and digest. So you've got parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. They work in tandem. They controlled by the polyvagal nerve, which is constantly trying to keep them in balance. So our bodies are always trying to keep in homeostasis. And our rest and digest is switched off when we see a threat. If any of you are running for away from something, the last thing you want to do is sit and go, oh, I'll make a sandwich then. I'm feeling hungry. You just want to get out of that danger. So, and that's why when we're really, really scared, sometimes people can wee themselves because the muscles around the bladder are switched off at that point, because all the blood is being pumped towards the limbs in order to fight or flight. And this is important when we have a look at anxiety. We're going to look at depression in a moment. This I'll put in the chat at the end of the presentation. You can do a self-assessment of your mood. There's one for children, there's one for under 16s, I think they classify it as, and there's one for over 16s. Have a look at it. It probably will mean you need to go and talk to your doctor. That's usually the outcome, but have a look at it. It's quite an interesting little exercise to do to look at your mood. So anxiety. These are the things that go with anxiety. So, we're talking about excessive worrying, catastrophizing, blowing problems out of proportion, feeling restless or edgy, irritable. And if you look, these are the kind of things that happen when we go into fight or flight. So anxiety is linked to fight or flight. It's linked to a threat. Now, generalized anxiety might be you don't know what that threat is. You're just generally feeling anxious. And so the muscle tension can be because you're building up that tension in order to run. Likewise, muscle aches. Sweating is because the body is trying to regulate your temperature when you're going into fight or flight mode. Difficult concentrating because your mind's on other things. Nausea, that can be because the rest and digest system has been switched off. Likewise, going to the toilet because of the same system's been switched off. Tiredness because people aren't sleeping, they're exhausted. And fidgeting can be a way of that nervousness. And these are all the other things that you can get from anxiety, which again, relate back to that flight and fight. Hot flushes and rashes relate back to the fact that blood is being diverted to different parts of the body when you're going into fight or flight. So, when some things that can happen with anxiety is when they get too much for young people, they can turn into panic attacks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a breathing exercise that can help with panic attacks. It doesn't it doesn't prevent panic attacks, but it does help when young people realize that they have some control over it. And often with panic attacks, what people think is happening is they're having a heart attack because their heart is pounding, their breathing goes like this. And it's the body is trying to get oxygen in because they think it's a threat and the body's trying to run away. The difficulty for the brain is that however sophisticated it is, which it is, it also doesn't know the difference between a threat and an actual threat. So if you go back into the position I asked you to, where you're sitting with your legs at 90 degrees to the floor, and just move your head slightly back and forth, side to side. Never roll your neck, because what you're doing is crushing vertebrae when you do that. Just gently move it back and forth. And if you close your eyes, when we take a deep breath in, we're going to count to 6 as we're taking that breath in, and you're going to hold it for 2 seconds, count to 2 when it's in your tummy, and then see if you can count to 7 as you're breathing out. It's not easy, but we'll try it 3 times, right? So breathe in, hold and count to 2, and breathe out, count to 7. So breathe in, counting to 6. And when you get there, hold it for 2, and then breathe out, counting to 7. And one more time. So breathe in, counting to 6, and then hold it for 2. And then as you breathe out, try and hold it back until you can count till 7 on its way out. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So that can be done with a young person for as long as it takes. What you're doing is you're slowing down their breathing, which is telling the heart to slow down. So you're combating the autoimmune system. So the autoimmune system, it works for us, controls the temperature, whether we eat what we want to eat, when we want to eat, when we're hungry. But the one thing we can do is we can control it consciously. It's all unconscious. We can control it consciously with our breath. So that's one way of helping young people get some control if they do have panic attacks. One of the other things is obviously looking at when they have panic attacks. Are there any triggers around those panic attacks? One thing I want to say about all this, about anxiety and depression, is it's got to a stage where people say, oh, I'm depressed. What they probably mean is they're probably a little bit down, a little bit sad. That's not depression. And the difficulty when people say, oh, I suffer with anxiety, do you? Or are you just anxious? Oh, I get depression. Have you got depression? Depression's a clinical diagnosis. So try and get young people to actually own what those emotions are, rather than just attaching them to anxiety. I'm anxious, I'm depressed, because what it does is undermines the whole basis of anxiety and depression, particularly where people are in the midst of it. It's particularly clinical depression. So it's important that we are careful about the language we use. So part of that fight or flight mechanism is the flop. And that flop is pretending to be dead. Now, any of you've got cats, however much you love your cats, they are very cruel when it comes to mice. And what they'll do is they'll either break their backs when they catch them, so they slow them down, but they'll play with them until they're dead. So what the mouse does is it pretends to be dead. And then the cat loses interest because there's no fun anymore. What it can do is, what happens then is that the cat will throw it up in the air or toss it to one side, and then the mouse runs away. So playing dead is a useful technique we've all learned as animals in order to combat threats. Now, what happens with depression is that we can play dead by staying underneath the duvet cover and hoping the whole world disappears, and hoping the things that we fear all disappear. So that's where you can see this link to the hypo. So if you think anxiety is hyper and depression is hypo, so it's a hypo reaction to a threat. And these are some of the signs and symptoms that go with depression. So, not taking, losing interest in things that people do on a daily basis, feeling down, a sense of hopelessness, crying and not knowing why, or some of the things people who have had long-term depression say is that they would be desperate to cry. When we cry, what happens biologically is that we release cortisone through our tears. And cortisone is a stress hormone, and it's very good for dealing with short-term stresses. It's brilliant for that. So house on fire, go get baby, run out of the house, marvelous. It's not good when cortisone is there to deal with long-term stress. And obviously you need to work out why you're stressed if it's happening on a long-term basis. But having a good cry also helps, because cortisone comes out through the tears as it is. It doesn't have to be dealt with by the body. And you can imagine it could, the adrenal glands produce cortisone. It's the kidneys who have to deal with it, to break it down for it to come out of our bodies. So, if you are feeling sad, having a cry is a good thing. That's what it's for. It can lead to problems sleeping, not being able to focus, finding yourself at the cheese counter in the supermarket and not knowing what cheese is, let alone how to, what cheese you want to buy, which leads to that inability to make decisions. And it can cause weight loss or weight gain, which again can add to the distress. It can also cause people to be irritable. If you're lacking sleep, being restless because you're constantly got these thoughts on your mind, being easily annoyed, feeling fatigued or weak, not having low energy. And part of that is because, is one of the good ways to combat depression is physical exercise, is eating healthily. Two of the things you do not want to do when you're feeling depressed. So part of the prevention of depression is about having a healthy diet, having good sleep, exercising, which then can help with the prevention side of it. But if with depression, it's often they will need someone to help them do those things. Like just going for a walk. Sense of feeling worthless, no interest in sex, any kind of thoughts of suicide or self-harm. With self-harm, if people who are depressed feel nothing, which is worse in lots of ways than feeling something, i.e. sadness, then better to feel something by hurting yourself than to feel nothing at all. And like tears create a release, people who cut themselves, that release of blood can feel like a release for them. So you can see where self-harm can link with depression, that feeling that need to feel something. So one of the things that can help with combating depression is about helping young people to notice their thoughts. What are their patterns? When this happens, I think that when the door, someone knocks on the door, I automatically feel panicky, or I wonder if it's someone come to get me. Those feelings of paranoia. When young people can become observers for their thoughts, that's then where they're able to notice, but also be able to manage those thoughts as well. And that's partly about learning about what those thinking patterns are, understanding when you change, when your mood changes, what changes it. And that's also about challenging those thoughts. But so any negative thoughts people are having, of trying to think about, is that how it is? Is that how I feel about it? And I'll give an example. Someone will miss the bus once, and they will focus on the fact they missed the bus once and were late for college. What they don't focus on is the 99 times where they didn't miss the bus. So it's about, you as practitioners helping to point out when those thoughts are being negative. I'll just give a word of warning. If you are working with someone who constantly has negative thoughts, constantly has negative dialogue, and you're trying to put in positives, it's exhausting. You may need a tag team on it, because every time you put forward a positive thought, then the person will come back with a negative thought. So you can only do it for so long, but it does help, because what it helps is getting them to think about those thoughts. This is a poem by Jalaluddin Rumi. So he's a 13th century Persian poet, so from modern Iran. And he is an incredible poet. I've read lots of his poetry. Don't ask me what it means. There are whole scholars out there who look at one word of Rumi. It's beautiful, but I don't worry about what it's about. I just enjoy reading it. It's beyond me. And this is one of his, The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honourably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So think of that poem and think of our minds as a guest house. And some of the young people you're working with will have unwanted thoughts. They will have thoughts running through their head. Some of them disturbing, some less disturbing, some of them negative, some telling them that they're inner critic, how awful they are, they're useless, and so on. So I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes looking at rain. And what you do is when that guest comes in, when that unwanted thought comes in, you recognize that thought. So say, for argument's sake, oh, you're no good at reading, something like that. So recognize it. Oh, I've had that thought again, and allow that to happen. Allow the thought to happen. And then inquire and investigate. Isn't that strange? Like, what's this thought about? And then non-identify. Oh yeah, actually, that voice that tells me I'm no good at reading, it's not me. It's just a thought, and that thought will pass. I'm not going to identify myself with that thought. And some of the ways that young people can do that, you say, oh, how curious. It's curious I've had that thought again. I thought that thought had gone. I thought we dealt with that. Oh, that's strange. Strange. I thought we got over that. I didn't think I thought about that myself like that. So think rain. Recognize, allow, inquire, and non-identify. And that constant buzz they have in their head, that will help when they have those negative thoughts. They're thinking that way. And you can teach them through that breathing exercise. Just close their eyes. And when they have that thought, think rain. Recognize, allow, inquire, non-identify. And these are the 5 ways to well-being. We create well-being through connection. And that connection is with friends, with family, with colleagues, with teachers, social workers, whoever's in their life, neighbours. And that's why lockdown was so damaging for children and young people. They were losing their connection with their peers. And think, for teenagers, they're the most important people in their lives. Sorry, parents. Once again, to adolescents, you're not the most important people in their lives. But don't worry, you do become important again once they go into their 20s. And being active. So physically active, but mentally active as well. And, keep learning. Learn to ride that bike you've always wanted to do. Learn to go for that swim you do. I know people who've learned to swim in their 70s. We're always learning. I remember when I was about 12, a teacher saying, if you don't read, your brain will rot. And I was like, oh my God, it was going to come out my ears. So learn. We're always learning. And we can learn from our clients. Be humble. Be humble in the face of your clients and learn from them. And help others. We get an enormous sense of well-being, of connection, of a oneness when we help others. Help that person across the road if they want you to help them. Do some voluntary work. Yeah, offer to help someone who says they're struggling with that essay, and take notice. Notice of what is around us. Be in tune with your environment, and those mindfulness exercises will help with that. It will seem like a big chore to begin with, And within time, that will change. And make time. All of us probably listen to music, but try and listen to music and nothing else. Just sit, put your favorite track on, and just sit and listen to it. And every time you go off, oh, I've got to do the shopping, oh, I've got to do this, just come back to the beat, or just come back to the melody, or just come back to the lyrics, and just sit. And you'd be amazed at how much we don't listen to music. It's on in the background, but put headphones on and just switch off for that. You know, even if it's only for a couple of minutes. It's easy to stop noticing the world around us. It's also easy to lose touch with the way our bodies are feeling and to end up living in our heads. Caught up in our thoughts without stopping to notice how these thoughts are driving our emotions and behavior. Debbie's asked about it. Does it matter what music it is? No. I mean, I know people who put punk rock on and go on, and go running, and that does it for them. What we know is that there's a research that was put out yesterday about listening to music whilst driving. I think it was Manchester University did it. And music that hasn't got lyrics in it, unless we know them really well, if they have complicated lyrics in it, that's not good for driving. Music that is hardcore techno or heavy metal, not good for driving in cities because it makes us more pent up. Classical music works. So yeah, whatever music does it for you, it's not so just about the music, but it's about paying attention. It's about being present in that mindful way. And getting better sleep. And this is bad news because nobody ever wants to listen to this. It's about going to bed and waking up at the same times. Don't press snooze, because all you do is snooze is you delay having to get up anyway, and you don't actually go back to sleep. So you must as well just get up. Ban screams from the bedroom. What we know is melatonin, which not only, particularly for teenagers, melatonin kicks in about 2 hours later than adults. So if we're sleepy at 10, they'll be sleepy at about 12 o'clock at night. Melatonin is responsible for helping us go to sleep. Screens interfere with melatonin as a hormone. And when you wake up, spread those curtains wide. Let the light in. Again, that triggers cortisol. That wakes us up. Don't lie in on the weekends. Nobody ever likes to hear this one. Because you're disrupting your sleep pattern. And it means come Monday, it's even worse to get. And have a big stretch when you get out of bed. You have just been paralyzed. We're paralyzed in our sleep, so we don't walk out of windows if we dream about flying. And don't use your phone as an alarm, because it has the news on it, and because it's a screen and it'll interfere with melatonin. Yeah, and you probably look at it before you go to bed, so leave it downstairs. So I want to do a last breathing exercise with you. This is a garden in Vita Sackville West Garden in Sissinghurst. It's called the White Garden. There's a reason why it's called the White Garden, and it's beautiful. And the point of that is that if gardens are your things, go in the garden. If listening to music's your thing, listen to music, and so on. Find your thing. Find your thing that makes you feel happy. You shouldn't feel guilty about feeling happy. So the last breathing exercise I want to do with you is I want you to close your eyes, and we're going to do a healing exercise. This is for all of you who are working too many hours, stressed too much about work, and not getting that work-life balance. And what I want you to do is, when we breathe it, first thing I want you to do is I want you to think about a healing color, a color that you associate with healing. Be your favorite color, and be any color. And when we breathe in, we're going to breathe in that color, and we're going to take it down to the tips of our toes and the tips of our fingers and the tops of our heads. And then when we breathe out, we're going to breathe out grayness. And when you breathe out, you can go, leave a big breath out as well. So breathe in Healing colour to the tips of your toes, tips of your fingers and the tops of your head, and then breathe out all that greyness. And breathe in that healing colour down to the tips of your toes, tips of your fingers, tops of your head, and then breathe out all that greyness. And then one last time, breathe in, healing colour, feel it going all over your body. It's searching out that greyness in order to breathe it all out. And then take one more breath, and then we'll come back to the room. There's time for any questions.
Mike, thank you so much. And sky blue is my colour that I was breathing in and out.
What colour was it?
Sky blue.
Sky blue.
So that's my, yeah, literally, you know, on a lovely summer's day, that's my colour.
Fantastic.
But thank you so much, Mike. Really informative and captivating, and certainly useful, and importantly, for those working with children and young people, information that we can transfer whilst we're working with them. I also appreciated the poem by Rumi in terms of acceptance and resilience. I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the audience in saying thank you very much for today.